the sinking of the RMS Titanic.
Ah yes, the Titanic. The ship so legendary, they basically called it a floating palace. Everyone thought it was unsinkable. You know, like your ex who thought they were irreplaceable. But let's face it, April 15th, 1912 was not a great day for the White Star Line, or for anyone on board the Titanic, for that matter.
Here's what happened. The Titanic, on its maiden voyage to New York, was cruising along when the ship's crew spotted an iceberg at 11:40 p.m. Now, this wasn't just your average iceberg. This thing was big enough to ruin dinner plans for over 2,200 people. The Titanic scraped the iceberg, which tore through its unsinkable hull. Those fancy watertight compartments, yeah, they didn't hold up. 5 compartments flooded, and that's when everyone started to realize they were in a world of trouble. But here's the kicker. They didn't have enough lifeboats. Because, you know, back then, lifeboats were apparently an accessory, like a nice hat, rather than a necessity. They had enough boats for only half the people aboard.
Out of the 2,224 people aboard, only 706 survived. The rest, mostly from the lower decks, cue the sad music for the third-class passengers. The sinking of the Titanic led to stricter safety regulations. But at that point, it was too little too late for 1,500 passengers who found out the hard way that the ocean doesn't care how unsinkable you think your ship is.
The Halifax Explosion.
Fast forward to 1917, and we've got the Halifax Explosion, one of the most spectacular examples of how not to handle explosives. On December 6th, 2 ships, one loaded with enough explosives to make a Michael Bay movie look tame, collided in Halifax Harbor. One was the French ship, Mont Blanc, which was carrying a cocktail of TNT, benzol, and picric acid. The other was the Norwegian ship, Imo, which clearly didn't know how to yield in narrow harbor waters. Mont Blanc caught fire, and its crew abandoned ship faster than you bail on weekend plans after a long work week. The ship drifted toward the harbor's waterfront, where a crowd of curious onlookers gathered. Because what's more entertaining than watching a flaming ship full of explosives drift toward you, right? Spoiler alert, that was not a good decision. At 9:04 a.m., Mont Blanc exploded with the force of 2.9 kilotons of TNT, turning half of Halifax into an instant wasteland. Windows shattered as far as 50 miles away. A tsunami followed, because why not? Over 2,000 people died, and 9,000 were injured. Halifax had to call in backup from across Canada and the US to deal with the aftermath. The moral of the story? Don't underestimate a burning ship loaded with explosives. Just walk away, people. Walk away. The Holocaust. Let's pause the jokes here,
because this is where history takes one of its darkest turns. The Holocaust was the mass genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others, orchestrated by Nazi Germany during World War II. Adolf Hitler's sick ideology painted Jews as the scapegoats for all of Germany's problems, and the Nazi regime systematically stripped them of their rights before sending them to ghettos and concentration camps.
It began with laws like the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, which essentially dehumanized the Jewish population and made them second-class citizens. But it didn't stop there. By 1941, the Nazis initiated the final solution, which was their cold, calculated plan to exterminate Europe's Jews. This led to the construction of death camps like Auschwitz, Sobibor, and Treblinka, where millions were killed in gas chambers.
But Jews weren't the only targets. The Nazis also went after Romani people. By the time the war ended in 1945, 6 million Jews, 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population, had been murdered. The Holocaust remains one of the most harrowing reminders of the consequences of unchecked hatred and intolerance.
The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
All right, let's shift back to the final days of World War II. It's August 1945, and Japan, despite being on the losing side, is still refusing to surrender. Enter the United States with 2 shiny new toys, nuclear bombs. The first, Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. The explosion instantly killed 70,000, 80,000 people. 3 days later, on August 9th, the US dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki, killing another 40,000 instantly.
But here's the thing. The bombings didn't just kill people outright. Over the months and years that followed, radiation sickness, injuries, and cancer claimed thousands more lives, pushing the death toll to over 200,000. The devastation was so horrific that Japan finally surrendered on August 15, 1945, officially ending World War II, and thus began decades of debate over nuclear weapons. Because nothing says we're done with war like dropping the most destructive weapons humanity has ever created, the Texas City Disaster. Now let's hop over to Texas in 1947. A French cargo ship loaded with ammonium nitrate fertilizer caught fire. Fun fact, ammonium nitrate is what you use if you want to blow things up. The captain tried to seal the ship's hatches to smother the fire, but that was like trying to put out a forest fire with a garden hose.
At 9:12 a.m., the Grand Camp exploded with a blast so powerful it sent a mushroom cloud into the sky and triggered a second explosion the next day when another ship, the SS High Flyer, also blew up. The disaster flattened Texas City, killed 581 people, and injured over 5,000. The docks, leveled. Buildings, gone. This wasn't just a bad day, it was catastrophic.
The Bhopal Gas Tragedy.
Let's fast forward to one of the worst industrial disasters of all time. Welcome to Bhopal, India, December 1984. Picture this. At a pesticide plant owned by Union Carbide, there's a chemical called methyl isocyanate, MIC, just chilling in a tank. Problem is, safety protocols were pretty much non-existent. On the night of December 2nd, water somehow got into the mic tank, triggering a chemical reaction that caused a massive gas leak.
This was not your average leak. This was a toxic cloud that spread over residential areas while people were sound asleep. When they woke up, they were greeted with choking gas that caused blindness, respiratory problems, and death. Thousands died within days, and over 500,000 people were exposed to the deadly fumes. The final death toll? Around 15,000, with thousands more suffering from chronic health problems for years after. The Challenger disaster. Now, let's go into space. January 28, 1986. NASA's Space Shuttle Challenger was supposed to be a historic mission. The first civilian, a school teacher, was set to go to space. But 73 seconds after liftoff, the shuttle exploded, killing all 7 crew members. The cause? A faulty O-ring in one of the solid rocket boosters. Engineers had warned that the O-rings could fail in cold weather, but NASA pushed ahead anyway, and the world watched in horror as the disaster unfolded live on television. The Challenger disaster wasn't just a tragic loss of life. It was a wake-up call for NASA, leading to major changes in how they handle space missions and launch safety. The Chernobyl Disaster. Just a few months later, on April 26, 1986, we had another disaster, this time in Chernobyl, Ukraine. During a late-night safety test, reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, releasing massive amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Radiation spread across Europe, leading to the evacuation of over 150,000 people. The radiation didn't just disappear. It's still there, causing cancer and other health problems to this day. The exclusion zone around Chernobyl remains one of the most radioactive places on Earth, and the disaster serves as a grim reminder of what happens when things go catastrophically wrong with nuclear power.
The Columbine school shooting.
Jump to April 20th, 1999, and we're in Littleton, Colorado. 2 high school seniors, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, carried out one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history at Columbine High School. Armed with firearms and homemade bombs, they killed 12 students and a teacher before taking their own lives. The Columbine massacre shocked the nation and sparked intense debates on gun control, school safety, and the role of violent media in shaping young minds.
Columbine also changed how law enforcement responds to active shooter situations, making it a pivotal moment in U.S. history and a turning point in how schools approach security.
9/11's attacks.
You know where you were on September 11th, 2001, because no one forgets. On that day, 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial planes, crashing 2 into the World Trade Center in New York City and 1 into the Pentagon. The 4th plane, United Airlines Flight 93, was headed for Washington, D.C., but passengers bravely fought back, forcing it to crash into a field in Pennsylvania instead. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives that day, and the world was forever changed. 9/11s led to the U.S. war on terror and major shifts in global security policies. It was a day that scarred the world, and its repercussions are still being felt today.
Deepwater Horizon oil spill, April 20th, 2010. The Deepwater Horizon oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico exploded, killing 11 workers and causing the worst environmental disaster in U.S. history. For 87 days, oil spewed into the ocean, releasing over 200 million gallons of crude oil. The economic impact, catastrophic for fishing and tourism industries. BP, the company behind the spill, paid billions in fines and settlements, but the damage to the environment and wildlife was already done. The Deepwater Horizon disaster stands as a sobering reminder of the risks involved in offshore drilling and the high cost of cutting corners. Fukushima nuclear disaster.
1 year later, on March 11th, 2011, a massive earthquake and tsunami struck Japan, triggering a nuclear disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. The tsunami knocked out the plant's power supply, leading to the meltdown of 3 nuclear reactors. The release of radioactive material forced the evacuation of over 150,000 people and left the surrounding area contaminated. The long-term health effects are still being studied. Fukushima led to a global rethink of nuclear energy, with many countries shutting down reactors and revising safety protocols.
Sandy Hook shooting, December 14th, 2012. Adam Lanza, a 20-year-old local resident, shot and killed his mother before storming into Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. In a matter of minutes, he murdered 20 children and 6 staff members before taking his own life. The Sandy Hook shooting reignited the national debate over gun control, but despite widespread outrage, significant federal gun control legislation failed to pass. Boston Marathon bombing. On April 15th, 2013, 2 homemade bombs exploded near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. The bombers, 2 brothers, led authorities on a dramatic manhunt that ended with one brother dead and the other captured. The bombing raised concerns about domestic terrorism and led to increased security at public events nationwide. Las Vegas shooting. Finally, on October 1st, 2017, the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history took place during the Route 91 Harvest Festival in Las Vegas. A gunman opened fire from his hotel room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay, killing 58 people and injuring over 850 others. The shooting reignited debates over gun control, particularly around the use of bump stocks, which allow semi-automatic weapons to fire more rapidly. The attack left an indelible mark on the city of Las Vegas, but the motivations behind the shooter's actions remain a mystery.